For our Nightmare Before Christmas 30th anniversary celebration, I knew I would be making the mayor, and his head would definitely turn around just like the movie.
Don't forget to see the mayor.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Jack, I have the plans for next Halloween. Where are you, Jack? I chose the specific movie frames for the facial expressions I wanted to duplicate, estimated his size compared to our big front Jack Skellington, then I cut some scrap PVC lengths that nested inside each other to rotate. The head post tucked down into the neck post and sat on a spacer to adjust how high the head needed to sit above his shoulders to spin freely. We were saving our fancy positionable PVC joints for other figures, so I used 45 and 90-degree elbows, plus I heat-bent some PVC directly for one of his arms. I only used slip joints to be modular and hopefully be animated by servos someday. Once I had the PVC skeleton working enough, I glued some scrap foam blocks around the center head post, then started carving the cone shapes of the head and hat with my hot knife tool. It was quite convenient that the head already spun, so I could keep checking how even my cone was without walking around the whole figure. The extremely tall, skinny hat was on another scrap post using a PVC coupler to come apart for storage. After the basic foam shapes finally matched my tiny mayor figure, I sketched both faces, carved out any recessed features with more heat tools, then used EVA foam clay to sculpt the facial details. I happened to have a small plastic ball the perfect size for his bug eyes, so I sculpted the eyelids right over them. The foam clay air dries in 24 to 48 hours, but it does sag, droop, puff, and smooth by itself over the drying time. Carving detailed grooves don't stay with sharp edges, but lumpy texture might smooth on its own, so it takes some trial and error. You can use a wood-burning tool or soldering iron to carve some details after it dries. I was very glad that my first foam clay projects were duplicating rustic-style clay figures. While the foam clay was drying, I found one of my rubber spiders was the perfect size and shape for his tie, so I cut thin white EVA foam and shaped it into his collar to let weight and time do the bending for me. For his medallion, I cut more thin EVA foam into the ribbon shapes, heat-formed them more roughly, spray-painted a red base coat, then dry-brushed them to the grungy Halloween Town style. After the foam clay was dry, it was time to paint. This was lots of fun, mixing my acrylics and shading details as he came to life before my very eyes. I kept spinning him around and making him talk in my best goofy mayor voice. Jack, I have the plans for next Halloween. Where are you, Jack? Thankfully, his tall, skinny hat worked fairly well. Black, thin EVA foam looked perfect for his hat brim, especially after giving it some shape with a heat gun, but it was too floppy at that diameter, so I added another layer of thin foam underneath for more structure. Most of this EVA foam is glued with contact cement, but I needed to use my hot glue gun for various trickier spots. Since the tall hat flares slightly out to the very top, it was only glued to its PVC post about 6 inches toward the brim. The long hat post tucked well down into the head post for stability, and the hat band hid that all. I cut a small circle and notched the edges to tuck into the tip-top of the hat, mostly for rain protection since it was taller than even the tallest people I know. The first set of hands were totally foam clay, so drooped out of shape while drying and weren't in scale to his body, so I resculpted them with wire inside to be posable. The hands are built on PVC coupler joints so they can slide into the arm posts at the wrists after putting his arms through the foam sleeves and seating the arms into the shoulder joints. Of course, I didn't forget his manicure. Making the mayor's wide cone body was the hardest for me, since I wanted to make him collapse for storage, and I didn't want umbrella ribs or tent pole lines peeking through his coat like hoop skirts do without petticoats softening the edges. I ended up with a smaller wire hoop hanging from his shoulder joints and a large hoop at the bottom, all covered with some plastic poultry fencing twist-tied to both hoops, defining a smooth cone. Of course, the balance kept adjusting as more material was added, so I was sure glad Jen could help me on hoop skirt day. Once the base structure was settled, the lapel jacket construction went fairly quickly and looked great. I needed 3 whole sheets of the thin EVA foam, but the seams ended up hidden enough in back. I did need to bend the bottom hoop to support the bottom notch in the jacket overlap, or the foam would just curl. His buttons are old water bottle caps from my hoard of interesting junk. Pack rat vindication again. I had been hoping to make pants and shoes, but we were out of time, so I used spare paving bricks to anchor the steel platform on the ground, since we cannot rebar through our artificial lawn. He still wasn't very stable with his whole body on his short little legs, since any breeze and his neck would be completely bent backwards. This body structure hack will definitely need to be changed for next time, but we are hoping by then he will move on his own with some animatronics. Despite all the last-minute stress, our mayor was still a hit out front, whichever face he was showing that day.
Great Halloween, everybody!
I believe it was our most horrible yet. Thank you, everyone.